while wandering around this amazing landscape, I was rather musing to myself, asking the question, how many countries the size and population of Wales actually have 4 major World Heritage Sites? This is an absolutely astonishing structure. It's not part of the entrance to an Egyptian pyramid or an Aztec tomb, but it is part of a very, very important World Heritage Site. This is just one of the many features in this phenomenally impressive quarry, the Dinorwic quarries, here in Llanberis. Just having a little breather climbing up this steep incline, but it's a perfect place to look back, and I can see the town, the village of Llanberis, Llanberis, and the wonderful medieval Dolbadan Castle. It's been a bit of a climb, but we've got to the top of the incline and we're here at the brake house. And this is where the trucks would come through, and we can see that on the right hand side is the empty drum, because the last full truck properly ran down the rails here in August 1969 when the quarry closed, and then the full truck was at the top here because that side of the drum is full of wire. And this is where the brakesman would stand, operating this lever, which controlled the brake on the drum and obviously slowed the rate of descents for the full trucks and the rate of ascent for the empty trucks. I just love coming to these places because look carefully and you'll find some personal details. Not so much information. I'd like to know who J.O.W., who carved his initials and date in 1898. Love to know a little bit more about him, but it's a lovely coincidence that he should have been here in 1898 because that was the year of peak production of slate in North Wales. I first explored the Dinorwic slate quarries in detail in 1970, which was just a matter of months after the quarry closed very unexpectedly in August 1969. And when I came into places like this brakesman's hut, the kettles were still on the stoves, the coats and the hats were still hanging on the hooks, and it really was as if they'd left that very morning. One of the things that's always impressed me about these quarries, just the quality of the masonry work. These buildings that are dotted up and down the length and breadth of this place. Well, just by scraping a few slates away, I can stand on the concrete threshold to this building. And this was one of the caban. And you find those in so many quarries in North Wales. Very important places where the men came to eat their lunch, but they had a great cultural association as well. I find it difficult sometimes when you come into such a ruined building like this to try and understand and imagine actually what went on in these places during their heyday. Well, we have a couple of reminders like the fireplace. There's a little place there for a shelf, but these cabins were more than just places to eat your food. They were so important in the cultural and intellectual life of the quarrymen. This is a wonderful place for an archaeological geek like me because there's so much left, like the railway lines, the trucks, and everything else. And even the waste tips themselves tell a story. These big rough chunks came directly from the quarry face, but those fine slivers of slate there, they're the remnants of the slate that was split in the dressing sheds, the wallei, just behind me. This is an offcut from one of the thousands of slates that were made here. And if you came to the quarry in the 19th century, you didn't necessarily order 2,000 10 by 12s or 14 by 8s or whatever the size was. You didn't necessarily use the imperial size, but you would come along and you would order 1,000 ladies or 2,000 princesses, because these lovely fanciful names were created by a North Wales judge in the 1830s who wrote a poem about the different sizes of slate. It's truly been said, as we all must deplore, that Grenville and Pitt has made peers by the score. But now 'tis asserted, unless I have blundered, there's a man here that makes peeresses by the 100. He regards neither Grenville nor Portland or Pitt, but creates them at once without patent or writ. By the stroke of a hammer, without the king's aid, a lady or countess or duchess is made. Yet high is the station from which they are sent, and all their great titles are got by descent. And wherever they are seen, a palace or a shop, their rank they preserve, and they are still at the top. Yet no merit they claim from their birth or connection, but derive their chief worth from their native complexion. And all the best judges prefer, so 'tis said, a lady in blue to a countess in red. Just walking along here, I spotted the climbing rope with it fixed to this pit on, so obviously people come along here to do some climbing for recreation. But it made me think about, how did the quarrymen actually manage to work these precipitous quarry faces? When they worked on faces like this, these high faces, the method they used was to get their rope, which was quite thick hemp rope, which would be fixed to a solid position on the top, and then it would be wrapped around their thigh. That method enabled them to lower themselves down the quarry face and then work prizing away the loose rock. This is a very useful information panel because it explains quite clearly and succinctly what went on in this massive building here, which they describe as being the size of 2 football pitches. But these were the dressing sheds, as they called them, the mills, and in there the roofing slates are actually produced. But producing those slates generated a huge amount of dust, and that was another one of the dangers that confronted quarrymen. I just can't believe how lucky I am to be here on this glorious January day, looking at the very peak of Snowdon. It's so wonderfully clear. And standing here in this great, expansive, open countryside, perhaps it's not hard to believe that the slates that were quarried from Dinorwic and other quarries in North Wales found their way across to the roofs of the world. So you can indeed say that North Wales roofed the world at one time. When this quarry closed in 1969, I think there were about 250, 300 men, something like that. I don't know the exact figure. But at its peak, there were over 3,500 men and boys employed in this quarry. This quarry was in operation in one form or another, for over 150 years. And what I find staggering, this was a very good quarry, produced high quality slate, but even so, it's been estimated that 70% of the rock that was excavated was thrown to waste, so it is only the remaining 30% that was actually made into roofing slates. Well, after 52 years, a visit to this place was always on my bucket list. Everywhere we look in this quarry, there are examples of engineering, mechanical engineering in this instance, because the remains of an old weighbridge. But what would happen if this weighbridge or the mechanism for the balance incline or something went wrong? How did you get it repaired? Well, the answer to that was solved right down the bottom of the quarry near the lake. And this was their amazing answer. Building these quarry workshops that looked like a fort that should be more at home in the Khyber Pass than the Llanberis Pass. But building these workshops in 1870, in which all of the trades that were necessary to maintain the function of that quarry were placed here in this one spot. And it was 100 years later, in 1970, when I first walked through this archway. I was employed by the National Museum of Wales at the time, and I had the wonderful privilege of helping to open this museum to the public. Now, this trip today, I'm sure, is going to bring back a lot of memories, and I just would like to share with you some of the people, some of the places, some of the events that happened those 52 years ago. One of the important men that I met back in 1970 was the quarry engineer, Hugh Jones. A remarkable man in every sense of the word. And I'm so pleased and delighted to see that they have a film commemorating him. And of course, along with Hugh Jones, there were all the other craftsmen, like the blacksmiths who operated in this incredible smithy here. Then I came into this foundry, and I was overwhelmed by the scale of the place, and also impressed with the craftsmanship and skill of Bob Moulder. And this wall actually holds very personal memories for me, because I actually painted this wall white, simply because it gave us an opportunity to display in all their glory these magnificent wooden patterns. I think there were about 3,000 patterns that we counted here. They had a pattern for everything, obviously for the machinery, but even a pattern for these wonderful windows. And I think I'm right in saying, if my memory serves me well, somewhere here there's a pattern for a one-way valve that was used on the lavatory of one of the company's steamships. And this was the domain of Eddie Patrum, the pattern maker, who could take a block of wood and, using his skill and expertise, produce a wooden cog ready to be sent down to Bob Moulder in the foundry. This must be one of the most astonishing bits of mechanical engineering in Wales for the period. It was built by the De Winton Company of Carnarvon. This magnificent 50-foot, 5-inch diameter water wheel, which is powered by water coming from the slopes of Wyddfa from Snowdon. But it really is a stunning piece of engineering in every sense of the word. This was the sole source of power to drive all the machines in the workshops and about a quarter of a mile of shafting and belts. I remember so well being here with Hugh Jones. And at that time, this wheel was absolutely seized. It couldn't work at all. And so I remember we had the job of taking off these top covers, seeing the magnificent brass bearings, and then loosening them, easing them, greasing them and oiling them until we could actually get the wheel moving again. Although at that time it wasn't powered by water. That came later on in the museum history. But the water wheel was replaced in 1926 by another bit of hydrotechnology, this Pelton wheel. When I walked into these workshops, I couldn't believe my eyes with all this incredible machinery was still here and still working. Lathes, cutters, drills, you name it, everything was here. And they were so wonderfully authentic. And what we tried to do was to keep the interpretation at that time to a minimum. And I'm so pleased to see that one of our interpretive panels that we put up in the early 1970s is still here and still functioning. It's great. Since my time with the museum, there have been a lot of important and innovative changes, like bringing these marvellous quarrymen's cottages here that tell much more of the story about the social and political history of the North Wales quarries. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege to have visited this place again after so many years. And of course, in this short film, we can't hope to cover all aspects of this incredible history. But at the very least, I'm so delighted to see this memorial to Hugh Richard Jones, the former chief engineer in the Dinorwic quarries. He was a remarkable man in a remarkable industry.